This episode's brought to you by the Public Domain Shop, a clothing brand inspired by classic literature and film. Use the code WOLF to get 10% off your next sweatshirt purchase. Of all the movies I saw at TIFF, Dust Bunny was the one I went in the most cold because the premise was so good I wanted everything to surprise me, and on first viewing, it was one of my favorites of the festival. Now that it's out in theaters, having rewatched it, it's still good, but lost a lot of steam. The movie centers on an orphan named Aurora, played by Sophie Sloan, haunted by a magic dust bunny who morphs into a giant rabbit monster under her bed, and after her foster parents get bit by the dust, she discovers her next-door neighbor, Mads Mikkelsen, is a hitman, and hires him to kill the monster. And that's all I'm gonna say, other than this is basically if Jean-Pierre Jeunet made Leon the Professional, where it's a kid's movie. At least, having seen it twice, this was clearly meant to be a PG-13. More on that later. A dark comedy, mafia crime thriller, and dark fantasy all in one. It's directed by Bryan Fuller, the creator of Dead Like Me, Pushing Daisies, and Hannibal, so it goes without saying he knows what works about each genre and can switch back and forth without ever losing his whimsical yet dark macabre tone all his works are famous for. The visual style is especially what makes this such a unique film, to the point where, for the first act, the camera work and actors' expressions visually tell us everything we need to know, making it practically a silent film. The cinematography gives the film a graphic novel feel, with the use of sweeping tracking shots, God's eye views, and Dutch angles that transition from each genre to tone perfectly, building up the suspense and humor with little to no exposition. When we see the little girl riding a bronze hippo wagon and climbing on furniture instead of the floor at certain times of day, we instantly know that's when and where the monster can attack you, among other small details that are subtly communicated to the audience. Up to a point, but again, we'll get to that later. And the set design's full of so many surreal patterns like monster plush toys, a staircase railing with snake heads on it, blankets covered in eyeballs, trees and wallpaper that move in times of danger, an LED mirror shaped like a halo that makes for pretty funny symbolism of Mads Mikkelsen being an angel of death, and a chicken lamp that was so stupid I kinda want a lamp like that, just put it right next to the Christmas Story leg. When it's a horror movie and the monster attacks someone, they wisely hide its full appearance until the very end, and instead cut away to floorboards rumbling at its presence to build it up. A pretty cool practical effect that kind of looks like Jenga pieces on the floor. That part was really cool. And the girl hiding under her bed or in the closet, listening to the intense sound effects of screams and chopping that were honestly scarier than when we actually see the monster during the climax. And the gangster action set pieces are good enough because they mostly take place at night and usually cut on impact. The lack of lighting can make it a little too hard to see who killed who, but the practical stunts of Mads Mikkelsen hanging on a ceiling Leon style and even get tossed through windows on ceilings, or FBI agents who literally bounce off walls to switch places when they're out of ammo, were still really cool and fun to watch. The world Fuller creates clearly has its own rules of physics, which, given it's about a dust bunny monster, isn't really that big a stretch, and if nothing else, it's super imaginative and makes me wish we got a lot more of the criminal underworld than we actually did. Which is a shame, because Bryan Fuller is practically infamous for world building, and while he only gives you tiny pieces of the environment, it's enough to impress. But without the quirky, charming chemistry between Mads Mikkelsen and Sophie Sloan, where Mikkelsen tries to understand her claims of a monster under her bed with a straight face, while Sloan, whose precocious delivery is better than most kid actors these days, persistently explains each scenario to him, this movie would be all flash, no substance. The majority of the film and its heart and soul is centered on Aurora trying to convince Mikkelsen there's a monster haunting her, because rather than take the money and pretend he believes her, which would have just turned into some liar reveal bullshit, which is what I was afraid was gonna happen, Mikkelsen surprisingly spends the majority of the film trying to convince her there is no monster and her fosters are dead because he thinks someone went to the wrong apartment to try and kill him, but because he has that moral code only hitmen in movies have where he doesn't want a child's blood on his hands, he feels obligated to protect her, and since he's the only adult in her life who'd risk his life for her, have the potential to kill this thing, and actually takes the time to investigate her claims without talking down to her, he does surprisingly treat her like an adult. Even when he first meets her, she does show genuine care and appreciation in return that he's clearly not used to in his line of work that touches him enough to care for her safety. And as for Aurora, she's seen so many people in her life disappear that whenever someone else dies in this, she's more accepting than she should be. Good night, sweetie. Goodbye. And when we learn how this monster came to be in the first place, some of the people in her life treated her so poorly that it makes sense she wouldn't miss them. It would also explain why in the beginning the lack of dialogue reflects how neither of them have anyone to confide in, so they keep to themselves. But once she sees his abilities as an assassin and approaches him for work, they both become more talkative, and in the process discover the one thing they have in common is that their unresolved childhood drama is the reason they're in this situation. But all that having been said, it's clear Bryan Fuller's better at writing long-form TV than self-contained 90 to 100-minute stories, because while their motives are clear, we really don't know anything about these two characters other than they had bad childhoods, because despite the opening for it being practically a silent movie, and a pretty good one at that, most of the character interactions and depth afterwards is non-stop exposition, mainly Mikkelsen and Sloan arguing over and over again about whether or not monsters exist, and then abruptly segue into their backstories where all they really say is that their parents weren't nice to them. That's literally the only explanation we get. There's no flashback to Aurora's parents being abusive, or montages of the monster attacking each family of hers that would have been equally scary, funny, given some of that gory slapstick that Dead Like Me is famous for, or Pushing Daisies, or Hannibal. He's kind of notorious for this stuff. And give some context as to how each family treated her and give some sense of what she's endured. But no, we just get her saying, they weren't nice to me. Mikkelsen, on the other hand, we never actually see be an assassin. If he kills anyone, it's to protect himself or Aurora. The first time she sees him in his line of work is when people are ambushing him. So we never actually see that darker side that should evolve and disappear the more he grows this friendship with a young girl. That sounded a lot better on paper, but you all know what I mean. This isn't actual Leon shit. Why he's being hunted by so many people is never answered. He's not a particularly cold-blooded guy like I mentioned, and while you can make the argument he was forced into this life, we don't get any hint of that until the twist at the very end. At least in Leon, we saw what Matilda's home life was like before she went to Leon for help, and we had wholesome moments between them that weren't involved with the actual story, like playing charades or teaching her how to shoot. The closest thing to a regular moment, at least regular in these guys' eyes, is once Mikkelsen's turned her bathroom into Satriel's and starts butchering people, he lets her tied up the already packaged limbs, which was pretty twisted in a fucked up way the first time around, but it's only one moment. Which reminds me, for better or worse, there is no fucking way this is an R rating. Every time someone's stabbed or shot, there's no blood except for when Mikkelsen wipes tiny, teensy drips of blood off the floor with his foot. That butchering the body scene I mentioned, the body's wrapped in so much saran, the only limb in sight is a foot, which is still attached, and this is all before he starts draining it. Hell, even when we see the monster devouring people, it's swallowing everyone whole despite the piranha-shaped teeth. It's clear as day this was made for a younger audience than what Bryan Fuller's used to, and I applaud him for trying to make something darker that younger and older audiences can equally enjoy, and don't get me wrong, the shootouts and fights we get were imaginative and choreographed well enough to enjoy, but as a guilty pleasure or a straight-up action horror, if this were a hard R in Fuller's typical fashion, it would have left more of an impact and also have given the side cast more to do, because almost every side character in this is just a plot device. Sigourney Weaver easily stands out the most as Mikkelsen's handler, because when she's cruel to him and Aurora in such a quiet, blunt, nonchalant way, her timing and delivery makes you laugh, but her attitude gives off this fun love-to-hate vibe. But Sheila Atim's just an exposition vessel for Aurora's past. David Dastmalchian doesn't show up until the climax, and again, he was funny in a weird, pathetic way, and I'll say this, watching this twat from Acolyte die was funny, but I wanted more of them. Again, if the criminal underworld and the people Mikkelsen were up against were shown in more detail, to be almost as big a threat as the monster, which is clearly what they're trying to do, it would have been so much cooler. As the first try for making a movie, not a show, Bryan Fuller's got some work to do in terms of world building and character depth, things he's definitely skilled at and can improve upon, but the performances we get from Mads Mikkelsen, Sophie Sloan, and Sigourney Weaver, the production value, and the blending of different tones is enough to recommend Dust Bunny as a one-time watch. And with that, guys, thanks as always for watching. Let me know in the comments below what you think of Dust Bunny. Be sure to stay tuned for more reviews, check me out on Patreon and buy me a coffee, and be sure to like and subscribe. Take care.